the live stream. It is streaming on live tube. So Crystal, we can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. We need to elect a chair for the 2022 year. Does anybody have anybody in mind to nominate? Fran?
I'll let Sherry go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Fran.
No, you go ahead, Sherry. Since you were chair last time, who would you like?
I was going to nominate Bill McDonald.
I would second that.
I'd second that. Or third it.
Okay, so I have a motion moved by Sherry, seconded by Fran, that Bill McDonald be elected chair of the Committee of Adjustment for 2022. All in favor? Okay, carried. So now over to Bill, I guess.
I want to know who's against. Who's against? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Crystal, you probably should have asked if there were any other nominations, but but it would have been unanimous anyway. So a moot point.
With that in mind, I just wanted my opening remarks before I go through those. I want to thank Sherry for sitting as chair last year. I have to admit that she's done a wonderful job. It's a steep climb if you hadn't done it before, and I think in the final analysis, she did a wonderful job, and I think we should give her a little bit of appreciation there.
Well, thank you everybody for your support.
Yeah. And before we begin our meetings, I have the opening remarks to make. I want to welcome everybody to this virtual meeting of the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Central Frontenac. I would first like to thank the members of the public, committee members and staff for making this meeting possible so that we can proceed with processing applications in a safe manner. Just so members of the public are aware, all members of the public are muted on our end and your cameras will not be turned on. For those of you who may be new to the Committee of Adjustment, my name is Bill McDonald and I am chair of the committee. We also have Francis Smith. Francis. Victor Hayes.
Sorry, I had to let a dog out.
Okay. Brent Cameron. Brent still with us? Yeah, I see his name. Tom Dewey.
Here.
Cindy Kelsey, don't see her name. Sherry Wan.
Hello.
Yeah. And Nikki Gowdy.
Oh.
And Philip Smith. Good. Cindy Deachman, our deputy clerk, will be assisting us as the meeting host. We are also being joined by planning staff, but only the Committee of Adjustment video will be on. The format of the meeting will follow the agenda posted online, which can be found on the township's website. Staff have also prepared a presentation for everyone to follow along with during the meetings. This will be shown on the screen. If you have joined us via phone, we encourage you to open up the presentation in the agenda and follow along. For each application with the public hearing, we will follow this format. I, as chair, will introduce the file so everyone knows where we are on the agenda. The planners will provide an overview of the application. We will then ask if there are any comments from the applicant or their agent. Committee members will then ask staff and applicant if there are agent questions, if there are any. The public will then have an opportunity to ask questions. I encourage you to ask any questions that you feel comfortable with the new process. The committee will then deliberate and vote on the application. Voting will take place with members of the committee raising their hands, and I will then state whether the vote was carried. If there are any previously deferred items, they will be first on the agenda. As the public meeting has already been held on those, we will ask if the applicants themselves have any questions. All members of the public will have an opportunity to provide comment on the new applications. If a person or public body does not make an oral submission at the meeting or make a written submission to the Township of Frontenac before the decision is made, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. The township staff will be in touch following the meeting and will forward a copy of the decision within 15 days to the applicant and anyone who is requested to be notified. Should you have any questions after the meeting, we encourage you to reach out to staff. The applicant and the minister or any other person or public body who has an interest in the matter may, within 20 days of making the decision or date of notice of appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal against the decision of the committee by filing with the Secretary Treasurer of the committee a notice of appeal. The Ontario Land Tribunal is not accepting appeals at this time. If there are any appeals to an application, staff will notify you this of what the process looks like. I will now ask Cindy Deachman to provide an overview of how the members of the public can participate. Cindy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the meeting is open for the public to comment, the chair will ask the member of the public if they have any questions or comments. At that time, members of the public will be asked to use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen. I'm just going to show that quickly here. Can you see the screen, the slide on the screen? So the raise hand feature is down at the bottom. This alerts the chair that you wish to speak, and I will notify the chair that I'm moving you over into the panelist view, and then let you know when you can unmute your microphone to speak. You will receive a notification. Please wait a second after unmuting your microphone before speaking. If you're calling in by phone, please use the *9 feature on your phone to raise the hand, and that will notify the chair that you wish to speak. You will hear a prompt on the phone that you have raised your hand, and you will be notified when your microphone has been unmuted. This afternoon, I just have to switch back to a different view here. I think we have about 7 attendees, members of the public participating with us on the line. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. In the unlikely account that a committee member disconnects from the meeting will proceed if quorum is met, and the committee members will attempt to reconnect. Should all members of the committee disconnect, the meeting will be postponed and all members will be asked to reconnect. If the meeting cannot be restored within 15 minutes, the meeting will be postponed and staff will be in touch with each of the applicants. A notice will also be posted on Township social media, letting you know. Thank you for your patience as we embark on this meeting. And that's done with. The first motion we'll deal with is I have a motion moved by Victor, second by Brent, that the agenda for tonight's meeting be adopted as. Were there any late additions to that, Crystal? No late additions as presented. Any discussion? All in favor? And motion's presented and it's carried. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of the panel on tonight's agenda by any member of the panel? The minutes will indicate no disclosures noted. I have a motion moved by Francis Smith and seconded by Sherry Wan that the minutes of December 19, 2021 be adopted as. Were there any errors or omissions as noted by anyone on the panel? All in favor of the motion before us? This motion is carried as presented. First item on tonight's agenda is B1021, Hinchinbrook Meat, creation of a new lot. Who's going to lead the discussion on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That will be me. Sorry, I was unable to unmute myself briefly there. As the committee may recall, this is an application for consent for the creation of a new lot from a property at 1274 Long Lake Road in the geographic township of Hinchinbrook. The proposed suburb parcel will be about 3 acres in size with about 50 meters, 165 feet of frontage along Long Lake Road. The retained parcel will be about 7.3 hectares or just over 18.5 acres with approximately 285 meters or just under 1,000 feet of frontage on Long Lake Road. This next slide shows the location. The subject property is this triangle-shaped property here. The proposed severance will be out of the southern corner southeastern corner of the proposed lot. This was circulated for review for septic suitability and to the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority due to the presence of wetlands on the neighboring property. Comments from both commenting agencies indicated no objections to the application as submitted. And at the time the public meeting was held, but previously there were no public comments received and haven't been to date. Planning staff were recommending approval of this application at the time. However, this was with the condition that the proposed development area, as you can see on here, met the minimum required separation distance from a licensed pit on the abutting property of 70 meters. As you can see on the screen with the measurements, there is sufficient area for a dwelling of approximately the same size as that which is on the subject property to be located outside that 70-meter setback, as well as along with the other provisions of the zoning bylaw for side and rear yard setbacks. The 70-meter setback requirement comes from the Aggregate Resources Act and is in both the official plan policy and the township zoning bylaw. One of the requirements when looking at new lots is to ensure that there is sufficient buildable area which meets all provisions of the zoning bylaw. With regards to that, there was a livestock facility identified on the opposite side of the road at 1273 Long Lake Road. They have sheep in residence and an MDS calculation was completed. This purple circle here shows the area of influence based on the MDS calculation for the livestock facility of that property. Again, you can see from this, there's more than sufficient area outside of that area of influence, both within and without that 70 meters for development. So planning staff are recommending that the consent application be approved as submitted, provided that the 70-meter setback and identified building envelope that meets all the provisions of the bylaw are identified on the reference plan required as one of the standard conditions, in addition to the other standard conditions, including 5% parkland, any outstanding taxes to be paid, survey and conditions within, actually that should be 2 years of the notice of decision now, rather than 1 year. When this was originally submitted during 2021, it was a 1-year provision for meeting conditions. As of January 1st, 2022, new regulations came into effect under the Planning Act that allowed up to 2 years from the notice of decision. So while the slide does say 1 year, the conditions included with the planning report do state that 2-year timeline. This application was deferred when it was previously heard at the committee in April of 2021, as the applicant had indicated a desire to locate the new dwelling on the proposed lot, approximately 35 meters from the lot line rather than the 70 as required for the separation distance from licensed pits. So what I'm going to do at this point, this is the deferred application. Again, planning staff are recommending that as submitted, provided all of the setbacks can be met, that the consent application can be approved as submitted, as there is sufficient area to meet all of the provisions of the zoning bylaw. As I noted, that the application was deferred in April to allow time for the applicant to explore the option of submitting a concurrent minor variance application to reduce that setback from 70 meters to 35 meters. They have done that, and I will discuss that now as it is relevant to the approval or not of this application. If the committee chooses to approve the minor variance, then some of the conditions recommended in the consent application need to be amended to reflect that reduced setback distance. So the application for minor variance was to permit a dwelling, as you can see on this sketch, approximately 35 meters from the property line, which abuts the licensed pit to the southeast, approximately 50 meters from the property line on the northeast, again 35 meters from the back with the septic in the rear, putting it more centrally located on the proposed lot, which I absolutely understand. However, this does not meet the provisions. One of the requirements, or I guess the requirement for reducing that setback, as you can see on this next slide, is the province has land use compatibility guidelines, and D6 discusses the requirements for impact assessment with regards to industrial land uses. Pits and quarries fall under the industrial land use. And that's where the 300-meter area of influence and the 70-meter separation distance is established. And that's as a result of provincial work on establishing these over history and looking at what on average is the ideal setback and influence area when addressing pits and quarries of these types. So quarries have a greater setback than a pit due to the blasting and a lot of the below water table work. So the area of influence for the pit on the abutting property is 300 meters with that minimum setback of 70 meters. Under the zoning bylaw, this setback actually is measured lot line to lot line. So the minor variance application submitted is for a 100% reduction in that setback. As I noted, because the setback is measured from the lot line of the pit to the lot line of the sensitive use property or dwelling property, because they abut officially, the setback reduction is 100% to zero because they do touch. However, planning staff do understand that the applicant is looking at constructing approximately 35 meters from that setback or from that property line. So while the setback, if approved, would be zero, it would be with the understanding that the distance from that side property line would be 35 meters, not right up on the property line. These provincial guidelines state that air quality studies for noise, dust, and odor need to be provided to the municipality by the applicant when any amendment to either the minimum separation distance or influence area proposed. Section 410.3 of that guideline details what's required as part of the submission to the municipality in order to make the assessment for the proposed reduction. That includes detailed mapping, on-site testing, and other things to measure both what the existing situation is with regards to these items and what mitigation measured, if any, are required. Sometimes there's sufficient buffering in place, other things, but without that study, planning staff are unable to fully assess the impact of a reduction in this setback on the pit to the south. The applicant retained a planning consultant and submitted a planning justification report prepared by Jason Budd, who's a registered professional planner and member of the Canadian Institute of Planners. However, after an analysis of that report, it is the opinion of planning staff that that report does not address any of the requirements of the provincial guidelines required to evaluate whether a reduction in that setback is appropriate or not, as there was insufficient information provided with regards to the minor variance. Planning staff are recommending denial of the application as submitted. Alternately, I suppose the committee, if they chose, could opt to defer it to allow the applicant more time to complete the required study. However, without that information, planning staff would not be able to make a recommendation for approval. So at this point, planning staff are recommending the consent application can be approved as submitted, provided that 70-meter setback is maintained, and that the minor variance application as submitted be denied, as the appropriate study was not provided, despite having information provided to the planner retained by the applicant as to what those requirements were.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Now, are there any comments from the applicant or their agent, Cindy?
The applicant wishes to speak. Can you use the raise hand feature? Okay, just a moment. I'll move you over. Go ahead.
Hello. Yes, it's Dan Meeks talking. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we've hired a planner. We applied for minor variance, and under the planner's report, they did a pretty extensive report of what the situation is here, and it was their professional opinion that we're far enough away due to the cedar swamp. We're already almost triple the distance that was required through the provincial Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And in one part of the report, from KD Warren, it does describe quite an extensive how Mr. Nettle should look after noise, vibration, and dust control if there's any complaints. Now, there is three houses that is within 10 meters of the fence line, and I guess what I'm saying is that if anybody's going to complain, it's probably going to be the people that are closer to the pit area than what we are. We're almost 250 meters compared to probably 10 meters from their own property line. And anyway, there's maps on everything here that's on the report. But anyway, I did talk to Jenny over the phone, and I said it would be nice for somebody to do a site visit. So I did contact one of the counselors in my ward and Mr. Cameron. So I don't know if he wanted to say anything or not, or what his view was on the whole situation. I don't know if you want to say anything, Brent, or what you've seen there.
Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate for me to comment at this time?
Well, if Danny's completed his comments, then we'll move forward to committee members, Danny.
Okay. I guess what I'm saying is, I mean, there is provincial guidelines and everything too. But in this situation, of course, not every situation is the same. We're dealing with the whole Cedar Swamp between this area, and we're also elevated probably 100 to 200 feet above where the pit area is. So I guess what I'm saying is, and what I said in the last meeting, I mean, you don't have to take my opinion. We've already got professional planners. You know, we pay them to do a provincial a report on everything, and it was under their view too that we're not only sufficient area away from the pit area compared to the other houses too that would complain about noise, dust, and vibration. So I guess what I'm saying is not every situation is the same, and I guess that's why there's a committee of adjustment that you guys are there to look at. So.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Committee members, you have anybody wish to speak and ask staff any questions in regard to this application? Brent?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had an opportunity to go to the site just shortly before New Year's at Dan's invitation to take a look and just get a sense of what we're talking about. And he was showing me exactly where the building envelope would be if we went with the plan that was being suggested tonight. The house would essentially be built right on rock, straight rock. There's not a lot of room to build avoiding rock, and quite frankly, I think it would be cost prohibitive to build in that particular location. My sense is that there would be a lot of blasting involved. Further to the issue of the setback, the active part of the pit right now is at the farthest reach on the other side of the property envelopes. So if you're thinking about where things are situated, the development in question is far to the left on the map, and the pit, the active part of the pit, is far to the right. And Mr. Meeks is correct that it's in closer proximity to houses along Long Lake and Goods Roads in that envelope. In between the amount of property that divides where he wants to build and where the pit is active, there is a cedar swamp, and he's right. There's a very wide envelope of property separating the active pit and the building envelope, but it's also very much into a ravine. So when he talks about being elevated, the area where the house would be is at a higher elevation than the pit, and both are higher than the cedar swamp, which is essentially full of rock and such. Again, the planning rules are the planning rules, and I came out and took a look. From my perspective, it looks like from my point of view, there is, I think, a reasonable argument that could be made that the house could be moved a little further over without causing any particular issues with regard to environmental concerns and the like. Again, the question is going to be, and this is something that Jenny brought up, that if there's going to be some consideration of an adjustment, that there's certain paperwork and there's certain conditions that have to be satisfied. You know, and I think maybe Danny or his representative might want to speak to that, because again, we still have to do best practices. But I think from a rational, logical standpoint, I don't think that the request that Mr. Meeks is making is all that unreasonable. And I think a logical case could be made, but again, it's how this is portrayed and how the paperwork is done and how the terms of various statutes are met. So I don't know if he or a representative wants to talk about the additional conditions that Jenny just mentioned previously, but I'll defer to, I'll hand over comments to other people at this time.
Okay, any other member of the committee have any comments in regard to this application? Now, first of all, we're going to be dealing with the actual severance or the consent application first, and then we'll be dealing with the minor variance. Francis.
Well, my question is to the planners, and that is, what exactly did Mr. Meeks' planner not deal with in the report that we are looking for to satisfy moving this house the extra 35 feet or 35 meters, sorry? Like, what did the planner not address?
Jenny, do you want to speak to that question?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you, Mayor Smith. That is, it's an excellent question. And to ensure I had the accurate answer, I looked up the guidelines and the requirements again today. And it requires detailed mapping showing the facility and all other, or the area subject to it, as well as an assessment of the types and levels of contaminant discharges being generated by that facility, in this case, noise, dust, and vibration. Indication needs to be given as to the methods by which mitigated measures will be implemented, including any agreements if required. And it does note that conditions of the license are not sufficient as a mitigation measures because of the way that it gets into a long discussion of point source emissions versus offsite emissions and how that goes. And none of the on-site testing was undertaken, or if it was, it wasn't noted or detailed in the report as to what those levels are and whether they are of any impact to either the potential for the pit to expand or if they would cause any potentially negative impacts. I absolutely appreciate that there are other houses closer. That does happen. It's the same with MDS for influence areas on livestock facilities. Sometimes these things happen. But it was really that there was a good list of things that needed to be assessed and evaluated, and those weren't. The majority of the discussion in the planning justification report was with regards to the consent application and whether the creation of the new lot was in best planning practices. And that was something that, provided the provisions, the bylaw could be met, the planning staff weren't objectionable to at that point. It was more that reduction.
Okay.
So just to follow up to that, in fact, then, if Mr. Meeks' planner went back and did the things that needed to be done and presented us with that report, that would be evidence then that would allow us to approve what he's asking for in the 35-meter setback reduction.
Yes, potentially, depending on the outcome of that assessment and the measurements taken on site. If they were satisfactory and if mitigation measures were determined to be appropriate as they are in place with regards to the elevation in the cedar swamp. I'm just not qualified to make that assessment. And without that assessment being provided, I can't really make the judgment call or recommend approval of a reduction.
Okay,
Through
thank
you,
you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add to what Jenny has said, with no disrespect to the planner that Mr. Meeks hired, these types of studies are generally done by professional engineers. So planners are not equipped to deal with all of the details and the testing that is necessary. So we are usually very clear with people when we tell them that they need to hire a qualified professional, that for the D-series studies, it needs to be a professional engineer. I don't know the nature of the conversation that Mr. Meeks had with this planner. I know that Jenny did have some correspondence explaining to them very clearly what was needed, but we did not receive the type of report that was necessary. Now, normally, once we receive these types of reports, and you will see this with a similar report later on in your agenda, we would have these reports peer reviewed by another qualified engineer to determine that, yes, these mitigation measures and this recommendation is appropriate. We have another consultant do it because unfortunately neither the county nor the township have an engineer on staff that can do that for us. In this case, we did not send the report to be peer reviewed simply because it is not an engineering report. It is a planning justification report that states that the consent and the minor variance should be allowed, but it does not contain the detailed testing necessary. So that is the rationale for staff's denial of the minor variance. Jenny had quite a few conversations with Mr. Meeks and he insisted he wanted to proceed. So he knew that we would be recommending denial. But if he does change his mind and wishes to have the additional testing done, not by a planner, but by a professional engineer, that we would be willing to see the application deferred until such time as that report could come back for review. Thanks.
Okay, Sherry, you had your hand up?
Just a question, really. I'm under the impression, I know we're talking about vibration and soils and stuff, but this is not a pit or a quarry where there's drilling and blasting and it's like an older small scale sand pit. Am I correct?
Who are you directing your question to?
Apologize to the planning staff.
Okay. In that case, the question we have to keep in our mind is that whatever the operation is going on there, that is a permit that goes on forever. And the activities that are happening there now may not be what happens 10 years from now or 15 years from now. So, Jenny, is there anybody in the public that has any questions in regard to this application? Sherry or Cindy?
Mr. Chair, I do see that Mr. Meeks has put his hand up again, so I think he might have a further comment.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
No, no. Can you
Dan?
hear me now? Yes?
Yep.
Okay, the Boulevard Group was in one of the names that we could choose, and they do have engineers working for them. Now, it was under their professional opinion that because of the distance already between the Cedar Swamp and that, it was unnecessary to do such noise and vibration. And then again, the report from Katie Warren, it's under the Mr. Nettle's supervision if anybody complains, and it's not going to be us that's complaining. It's going to be the houses that are close within 10 meters of the fence line that's going to be complaining, and Mr. Nettle would have to address the noise, dust, and vibration. And I mean, there's 20,000 tons of dirt that could be excavated into there per year, and Mr. Nettle is taking 1,300 tons a year, which is very minimal. It's like 8 loads a year, and he's almost to the fence line anyway, within the 30 meters of the pit, and the pit will soon be shut down. But back to the planning report, that name was on the list, the Boulevard Group, not Jason Butts, and they do have engineers working for them. And it was in their professional opinion that they thought it was unnecessary to get an engineer's approval, that the noise and dust has nothing to do with the distance it's already required through the Cedar Swamp. It's already been that 3 times that distance.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dan. Members of the committee, do you have any further questions? Victor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that area, I go past there all the time, and I know that the Netto pit is not overly used and it is set way off. So this is all common sense that the pit is not going to be an influence on the new building site. However, common sense doesn't override regulations. And the report that we have is not an engineer's report. An engineer's report is required. If the consulting company has engineers, then the engineers need to sign off on that report in order to satisfy these requirements. And I think what would happen is if the engineers went in, they would look at it and they would do their studies and they would find, yeah, there's no issue. But until the engineer signs off on the report, I don't think that we can approve this minor variance.
Okay. Any other members of the committee have any comments in regard to this particular
Mr. Chair,
issue?
Sonia Bolton has her hand up again. She might want to address something.
Okay, go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to just build upon Mr. Meek's last comment about the planner and the Boulevard Group. My understanding is the members of the Boulevard Group are all planners. They may have a consultant who may have been working for them, but the report that we received that is attached to the application does not come on letterhead from the Boulevard Group. It is signed solely by Jason Budd as a professional planner. And Mr. Heese is correct that we need a report that is signed by a professional engineer. So that is what we are looking for. And everybody is correct in saying that there may be existing mitigation measures that already take this into account. That may certainly be true, but ultimately it needs to be a professional engineer that makes that determination and signs off on it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Francis, go ahead.
So I guess for me, my question would be to Dan is, are you prepared to go ahead and do that so that we can defer this tonight until you can get that stuff done?
It's been 4 fucking years.
Sorry, don't interrupt, please. Go ahead, Francis.
No, that's all. I guess my question is to Dan, is he prepared to do any more work, or is this it for him and we'll make our decision accordingly?
Am I on?
Dan, yes,
you
go
are,
ahead.
Yes, I guess in the last meeting, when we talked about things, they said the report would be under $1,000. We're already over at $250 an hour. The planning report, we're way over $1,000 for sure. I guess my question is, can the council overrule the planners? And if they do vote on it, is that it, or can we do a deferral?
Once the decision is taken by the Committee of Adjustment, Dan, council cannot overrule that unless you want to go to Ontario Land Tribunal to judge it. But the question I have, and I think the committee is asking you, is if we defer this and give you a window in which to come up with that engineer's report, would you be able to do that in the next month or so, or whatever it might take?
Well, it's been almost a year now since we tried to get a planner. We tried other planners too as well, and it's very hard to get somebody to do this.
We have several options, Dan. The first motion is to create the lot, and then the second one is to defer your minor variance till such time to give you a little bit of time to work with the planners, and you know what the planners want.
Yes, I do, but it just to the planning people that we did hire, they said it was just common sense to see that that the noise, vibration, everything, because of the distance so far away, wasn't necessary at all.
Yeah, Dan, the issue we're dealing with here is the provincial policies tie the hands of the Committee of Adjustment, and it may be a situation where this lot is created and this house is put on there, and you are no longer the owner of that lot when something comes back to bite the township. So we basically have to go along with what the planners are saying, or we could end up having the township in a bit of a vice. So that what I'm,
So in the report also too, we could put in the deed that we're aware of the 70-meter setback, and that we could put right in the deed when we get it registered. Would that work?
that will be the recommendations, I believe. Right? So.
But
Does
I think to be clear, the application in front of us for the minor variance has to be approved, denied, or deferred, right?
That's correct. So
The
I'm given the
severance is
option.
a separate,
Yeah,
the severance is a separate application.
That's first,
Yes.
right? The severance, the consent application is before us right now, and I have a mover and seconder on that, and that's recommended approval. Now, the minor variance, we've got three options there, Dan. We can simply deny it, or we can defer it. And our planners are recommending denial, and my personal feeling was that I'd like to defer it to give you an opportunity in which to come up with the information they're requiring.
Okay, I guess that's the way we'll go.
Okay. Any other comments from any member of the committee? In that case, I'm going to read a motion. Moved by
Mr.
Tom
Chair?
Dewey.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
Was there
sorry,
someone else?
I just want to be clear. Then are we deferring only the minor variance, or are we also deferring the severance?
No, the severance has been recommended for approval.
Yeah,
So we're going
understood.
to
I
create
just
the
want to make
law.
sure. Well, one of the conditions of the severance was that they would build 70 meters back. So would we have to modify that?
The minor
that
variance,
condition?
yeah, the minor variance will take care of that at a later date.
Oh, I
once
see.
we
So
get-
we can pass this severance now, this consent application now, with the condition of the 70-meter setback, and the minor variance in the future could take that condition out of the consent application.
That's correct.
Very well.
Is that not correct, Jenny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's what I wanted to note, that if the severance application is approved today, as I said, one of the additional recommended conditions from planning staff was to identify that building envelope and have that survey sketch form part of the decision. So any development on there must meet provisions of the zoning bylaw. Without that subsequent minor variance, they couldn't go any closer than the 70 meters. So if you choose to approve it, it will be with meeting all minimum provisions of the zoning bylaw, which there is sufficient area, and that does include that 70-meter setback.
Okay. Until such time as they request a minor variance.
Absolutely. If a subsequent variance comes in and has the sufficient support for it, then there is an opportunity at a later date for that reduction to take place.
Right. Okay. Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Just I wonder if we should be asking Mr. Meeks if he would also like to defer the consent application, because it could be that once he gets into looking at this D6 study, that he may decide that he doesn't want to go ahead with any building, and then the severance would be a waste of his time and money.
Right. Dan, are you still online?
Yes. Yes, I guess we might as well wait and see how much the cost of the engineer's approval and see what the cost is, I guess.
So do you want to defer the consent application also?
When we come back for the minor variance, it's going to be approved at that point?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I think
Yes.
we'll wait then.
that's a
So
motion.
we can
You'll-
defer both.
We can defer both then?
Yeah,
Okay. All right, I'm going to, we'll move forward here. I'll move the motion is a move by Tom Dewey, second by Victor Hayes, the consent application B1021 Hinchinbrook Meeks for the property located in part lot 26 in section 4 in the Township of Hinchinbrook for a 1.23 hectare, 3-acre parcel as a new lot be deferred at this time. All in favor of that motion? Be deferred. Okay. Then I'm gonna.
Okay.
I have a motion moved by Fran Smith, second by Tom Dewey, that minor variance application A2621 meets the property located in part lot 26/4 geographic township of Hinchbrook, Long Lake Road to permit a reduction to minimum required 70-meter setback with the boundary of the licensed pit for construction of sensitive land use be deferred until the applicant provides an additional technical assessment required in conformity with the D6 land use compatibility guidelines. All in favor of the motion? This motion's deferred and it's carried. Okay. A lot of pink sheets in front of me here tonight. Okay, the next item on tonight's agenda is B5721, Olden Barker, creation of a new lot. Who's leading the discussion on this one?
Mr. Chair, it's going to be Dimitri.
Go ahead, Dimitri.
Thank you. Just for the benefit of everyone and all the public in attendance tonight, my name is Dimitri and I'm one of the planners with the County of Frontenac. So application B5721OL proposes to create a new lot together with a right-of-way from a property located on Frontenac Road in the geographic township of Olden. There's also a minor variance application that's concurrent to the severance application. That application is A0122OL. And that minor variance proposes to reduce the required minimum separation distance between the lot line of an existing waste management facility and the lot line of a proposed lot from 500 meters to 460 meters. So severance application B5721 was deferred on October 14th, 2021, so that a concurrent minor variance application could be submitted to vary the separation distance between the proposed lot and the existing waste management facility. So this severance is now back in front of you with a supporting minor variance and a D4 study. So just to refresh everybody's memory, the subject lot is located at part lot 16 East, Olden Concession 4 in the geographic township of Olden. More specifically, the property is located just south of the intersection between Highway 7 and Frontenac Road. The application proposes to create a new 2.73 hectare or 6.75 acre lot together with a right-of-way that provides access to the rear of the retained land. The severed parcel is proposed to have about 165 meters or 540 feet of frontage on Frontenac Road, with the retained lands retaining approximately 150 meters or 492 feet. The subject property is designated as a rural and mineral aggregate resource by the Township Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw. The actual severed lot and the right-of-way is designated as just a rural area. So application A0122OL was submitted with a supporting scoped D4 study in accordance with provincial guidelines and peer reviewed by the township's waste management engineering firm or the consultant. The scoped study was limited to investigating potential impact on air and water quality as the result of the operations from the waste management facility to ensure that the waste management facility is not going to have a negative impact on human health should the new lot be developed with a sensitive land use. The D4 study confirmed that there will be no major issues associated with this severance. However, they did identify elevated iron and turbidity levels in nearby wells and have recommended for the applicant to retain a qualified water specialist or water treatment specialist when they go to install the well. The application was circulated to the Township of South Frontenac for septic comments and the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority for comments related to natural hazards and natural heritage features. Both agencies identified no concerns and have concluded that the proposed lot contains sufficient area for development outside of any natural hazards or natural heritage features. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed consent for the lot creation conforms to the provincial policy statement, the township official plan, and the township zoning bylaw. And planning staff are also of the opinion that the proposed minor variance meets the 4 tests of the minor variance. And as such, staff are recommending that the Committee of Adjustment hear comments from the public and approve the 2 applications as submitted and subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Cindy, do we have anybody, comments from the applicant or their agents?
Does the applicant wish to speak? Can you use the raise hand feature?
I don't think the applicant was going to be on. He had to work, but just double check.
He is listed in the attendee sheet. Hang on a second. He has put his hand up. Okay. Hi, Colby.
Hey, guys. Yeah, I'm here. No, that all sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks, Colby.
No problem.
Committee members, do you have any questions of the staff or their agent in regard to this application? Tom, go ahead.
You're muted, Tom.
Sorry about that. Anyway, the only concern that I had looking at and I know where the property is there at Highway 7 and Frontenac Road, was the egress and regress from that proposed right-of-way. Will there be sufficient, is there traffic area there so that traffic will not impede any traffic coming up Frontenac Road or coming off Highway 7? Because it's fairly close there to the Highway 7 Frontenac Road intersection.
Tom, I can vouch that I've used that entrance many times to go in and out of there with a large truck, and it never created much of a problem. So, but the planners may have further comment on that.
Sorry, Crystal would like to comment toward that.
There's an existing entrance there, and Public Works has looked at it and was okay with it.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, Sherry, did you have a comment?
No, sorry, Mr. Chair. I was just letting you know that Crystal was wanting to speak to the question.
Okay. Cindy, is there anybody in the public who wishes to ask a question regarding this application?
If there is anyone else who wishes to speak on this, can you use the raise hand feature now? I see no one, Mr. Chair.
No one?
Correct. I don't see anyone wishing to speak.
Okay. In that case, does the committee members have any more comments in regard to this application? Seeing none, I'll read the motion then. This is moved by Brent Cameron, seconded by Philip Smith. The consent application.
Mr. Chair, I think Fran had a question.
Yeah.
Who has another
Actually,
question?
I should have just jumped in. Not a question, just a comment, and that is, I know with all the investigation that Colby had to do, it was costly, but again, it's one of those things in the policies and the provincial policy statement that we have to follow. And thank you, Colby, for doing what you needed to do to get this done. It'll be a great spot for your home. That's it.
Thank you, Francis. Okay, then I'll read. She just likes to hear me reading. That's why she stopped me in the middle of this. So I have a motion moved by Brent Cameron, seconded by Philip Smith, the consent application B5721 Olden Barker for the property located in Part Lot 16, East Concession 4 in the geographic township of Olden for a 2.73 hectare, 6.75 acre parcel as a new lot, together with a right-of-way, be approved subject to the conditions noted in the planning report. Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed, and the certificate of official issued within the period of 1 year from the notice of decision was issued as required by the Planning Act. Any further discussion, members? All in favor of the motion before us? Motion's carried. And Following up, I have what is this one? Minor variance application. Does planning staff wish to comment on this one, or have you already made your comments? No further comments? Then I have a motion before us, moved by Sherry Wan, second by Victor Hayes, that minor variance application AO 122 for the property located in part lot 16 East concession 4 in the geographic township of Olden to reduce the minimum separation distance from the lot line of a waste management facility and the lot line of a new sensitive land use be approved subject to the conditions noted in the planning report, and that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. Further discussions, members? All in favor of the motion? This motion is carried. Okay. Yeah. Next item on tonight's agenda is B6821 Olden. Courty costs to creation of new lot. Who is leading the description?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That will be myself this evening.
Okay, carry on.
So this application again has returned to the committee. It was deferred late last year due to a request from the Conservation Authority to demonstrate a suitable building envelope on the subject property, as there is we'll say a pond, a wider part of the creek that runs through it. So I'll just go back through what we were looking at that point. The severed parcel will be approximately 4.84 acres, just under 2 hectares in area, with the retained lands not being 2.1 hectares. Sorry, again, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a significantly larger. It's about 200 acres, not 2.1 hectares. Anyway, so the severed parcel is a smaller parcel, and the features on it is that there's a large pond in it. It has a right of way for access to those retained lands. As the committee may recall, this is the diagram shown last time. At that point, there was 2 lots proposed, the one north of this one, which was approved at that point, and then this one here, which was deferred. As you can see, there's Crooked Creek forms a decent sized pond in the middle of this property. This application is together with a right of way, which is shown in this gray hatch for along the existing driveway, as well as south over a bridge and with access to the retained lands. The reason for the right of way that travels south over that bridge for the access is that Crooked Creek continues on to the west and essentially divides the northern and southern portions of the retained parcel. And the Conservation Authority was not generally in favor of any additional crossings of this creek. They also requested that the bridge in place be engineered so that it is ensured that it won't collapse under the weight of any vehicles, that it is sufficiently sized to accommodate the maximum water flow of the creek through there as it runs into Kennebec Lake. It was also circulated for septic approval, and comments dated 26 November 2021 indicated no objections to approval of the application. However, the septic approval did strongly suggest that the area where the test holes were dug as the evaluation was reserved for the septic system, as the soil conditions and water body setback on the lot limited the area for where that septic system could be installed, and it was determined that those test hole locations were probably the best and most ideal spot on the property. So the sketch submitted with the application showed that the house or dwelling and septic will be located in approximately this area. Again, this was deferred as conservation requested a survey sketch confirmation of these distances and setbacks. This next slide shows the sketch that the applicants had prepared by Callan Dietz, Ontario Land Surveyor, and it demonstrates a suitable building envelope. This line here is the limit of the high water mark as flagged by Quinte Conservation. This line here is a 30-meter setback as measured by the surveyors from the flagged boundary of the water body. And this staked out area here is the approximate location of where the applicant wishes to build the new house. As you can see, there is sufficient area outside both the 30-meter setback, and that meets the required rear and side yard setbacks in the zoning bylaw for the construction of the house and the installation of the sewage system. Quinte Conservation further requested engineered drawings. Those were provided, and subsequent to that review, some additional requests with regards to the requirements for the engineered drawings and sketches have been asked from Quinte to be provided. As a result, planning staff are recommending that this application be approved with the condition that Quinte Conservation is satisfied that the drawings, the layout and location of the bridge are acceptable to them prior to the signing of the certificate of official. It has come to the notice of planning staff that the applicants have requested an option to have a development agreement put in place as part of the consent approval because they have sold the retained lands and are unsure that they will be able to complete the required work and upgrades to the bridge in advance of the closing date in April. This would be similar to the development agreement that the committee approved for the Mr. Vialta and the creation of the 2 lots along Coal Lake, that there was some concerns again with the timing of the construction of that right of way in advance of the certificate. So that is up to the committee. Planning staff don't see any real objections to having a development agreement, provided it's done with the appropriate legal means to ensure that that bridge is constructed and engineered sufficiently to accommodate both the flow of the water and that it is not a safety hazard. Right now it's in place, but the boards aren't screwed down, so you can walk across it, but I wouldn't drive a car across it. So I can appreciate the requirement for the engineered. Ultimately, planning staff has said are recommending approval of this application as submitted, providing that Quinte Conservation is satisfied that the requirements provided for that bridge upgrade are suitable to accommodate their concerns.
Okay, thank you. Cindy, do we have any comments from the applicant or their agent?
If the applicant wishes to speak, can you use the raise hand feature? Okay, just a moment, I'll move you over. Okay, Mr. Corticus. Can you unmute and try to speak, Mr. Corticus?
There we go. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. We have the surveyors in there. They're starting this week to do the 100-year flow calculations. The surveyors are working with the engineers that designed a bridge for us. So that should be done in the next probably 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks. And then we should have all our ducks in a row, and then we can start installing the bridge this summer, spring, summer. So that's the plan anyways.
Okay.
And it will be a proper, it'll be a proper engineering report, stamped engineering report and everything. So it should go ahead.
Okay. Any further comments, Ron?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Committee members, do you have ask any staff or the applicant any questions in regard to this application? Victor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is a question for Jenny. I was confused about the conditions and whether we put in a site development plan. It sounds as if that would be the way to go to allow the Corticus family to build that bridge. So should we be going ahead with that? I just want to be clear so that the motion is the correct motion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The planning report did not include a condition with regards to the development agreement because at that time the report was written, I was unaware that there was additional concerns from Quinty. I thought they were good with the 2 or 3 iterations. Turns out they wanted that 100-year flow. It looks or appears based on Mr. Cordes' comments just now that they'll be able to complete those requirements for the design. In order to sign off on the certificate of official, generally any right-of-way needs to be designed, surveyed, and constructed in advance of signing that certificate. And I believe the concerns are with regards to the construction side, that they should have sufficient understanding and approval for the design part of it, but getting that construction done in advance of their closing date for the sale may be a challenge. And I think that's why they were hoping for a development agreement just with regards more of the construction side of it.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, Crystal would like to add to the comments.
So Victor, we have changed the conditions a bit to what was in the planning report and have added in for a development agreement. Maybe when Bill reads them, you can see if it's okay.
Okay, thanks,
okay?
Crystal. I just want to make sure that we're not going to be tying their hands as far as the timing goes. I understand that signing off or on the sale, and just want to make sure that we're not going to be messing up their plans.
That's what we were trying to cover by doing a development agreement.
Okay. Cindy, is anybody in the public that might ask a question regarding this application?
Hey, if there is anyone who wishes to speak on this application, can you use the raise hand feature? I see no one, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee members, you have any further questions regard to this application, either from the planners or for the applicant? Hearing not, seeing nothing, I will read the motion then. This motion is moved by Tom Dewey, second by Nick Cowdy. The consent application of B6821 Olden Corticus on the property located in part lot 22, concession 12 in the geographic township of Olden for a 12.35 acre parcel of a new lot be approved subject to the following amendments to the conditions noted in the planning report. 1. The land to be severed by consent application B6825 Olden shall be for the creation of one new rural lot, approximately 2.5 hectares or 6.23 acres in the area that will gain access from the end of North Road and be subject to the right-of-way in favor of the retained parcel, not including the lands included in the consent application B6721 Olden. 2, the amendment to the condition 8 as follows. The description of the transfer and schedule for consent endorsement must include the creation of a new easement over the lot to be created through consent application B6821 Olden for a right-of-way access to North Road in favor of the retained parcel, not including the lands included in consent application B6721 Olden. If it is not possible or practical to create this easement in the same transfer deed as the severed lot, the applicant's lawyer shall provide to the Secretary Treasurer a copy of a draft of transfer of easement creating said new easement as well as an undertaking to register same as soon as possible following the creation of the new lots. 3, the addition of condition 10A as follows. 10A, in the alternative, if the applicant cannot satisfy the requirements of the conditions 9 and 10 before seeking the consent endorsement, the applicant shall enter into a development agreement at the applicant's expense with the municipality to require that prior to the issuance of any building permit for the severed and or retained lands, not including the lands subject to consent B6721 Olden, that the requirements and the conditions 9 and 10 must be fully satisfied to the sole discretion of the municipality. Said developments agreements shall be registered on title to the severed and retained lands, not including the lands subject to consent B6721 Olden, and at the expense of the applicant. that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirement of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant or any person or public body that made written requests to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and that all the conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued as required by the Planning Act. I think you're getting these long motions back out here because I'm the chair now and do more reading. Any further discussions by any member of the committee? All in
Mr.
favor of the
Chair,
motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify, just to explain what some of the changes relate to the easement in favor of the retained lands, because there was a previous severance already approved, taking off a severed lot. The intention, I believe, was that that severed lot would not have the benefit of the right of way. So that's why the condition was changed to remove the lot. I think it was B67, which has already received approval, but has not been completed. So I just wanted to explain why that portion of the amendment was put forward.
Great, thank you, Cindy. I think that was well explained in the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. So the applicant will receive the instructions, right, Crystal? It says so and it says so in the motion.
Yeah, they will.
Okay. Next item on tonight's agenda is application for consent minor variance B6221 Hinchinbrook ground and the creation of a new lot, and it's to be deferred. I have a motion before me. I guess I should ask the planner, do you want to make a comment on this particular application before we move forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've notified this as a public meeting, we should explain that and give the public an opportunity to make comments at this time.
That's
This
right.
application is for the creation of one new lot from a property located on Second Lake Road in the geographic township of Hinchinbrook. The proposed lot will be about 1.15 hectares in area with approximately 80 meters of frontage along Second Lake Road, with the retained parcel being about 16.85 hectares and 257 meters of frontage along Second Lake Road. On this next slide, you can see the proposed lot is outlined here in the yellow dashed area. There's sufficient frontage on both sides of this for the retained parcel. The retained parcel is vacant currently and used for agricultural purposes. This lot's proposed as a rural residential building lot. It was circulated for review by both Septic Approval Authority and Quinte Conservation. Comments from Quinte Conservation from December 20th, 2021 indicated no objections as submitted. They did note any lot grading, site construction, development within 45 meters of any of the identified or mapped wetlands in the area, of which there are many. They're just not showing on this map because they kind of take over. Be submitted to Quinte in advance for any permits or requirements. The comments from Township of South Frontenac requested deferral due to winter site conditions. They were unable to get out in advance of the snowfall. So they have requested deferral of the application for that reason. Planning staff are recommending deferral as it makes sense to confirm you can put a septic on a new lot that you wish to build on.
Thank you. Cindy, is there anybody there, the applicant or their agents online by chance?
The applicant wishes to speak. Can you use the raise hand feature? Don't believe the applicant is on. Oh, we do have Amanda Redmond. I'm going to allow to speak. Go ahead.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Amanda Brown, Doug's daughter. He's here with me and he's going to speak.
So was there any other conditions that weren't met? It was just the septic part of the application?
Yes, that is correct. Because there was no evaluation done with regards to that. That is the reason for deferral at this point, which is fairly common in the winter in this area due to the snow and frozen ground.
Okay, well, that's, I just wanted to make sure that that was what we were hearing, I guess. And
Okay.
we had talked to the Quinty, and they said that they were in favor of it with with certain conditions with the wetland.
Okay. Anything further? Committee members, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant? Francis, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question, and I think I've asked this years before, but I'm going to ask it again. Is there a reason why we could not grant this severance with the condition that before a building permit is issued, they must get a septic inspection approval permit? So that when time comes that the snow is gone and the septic people can get out, it doesn't have to come back to committee to go through the planning process again. Instead of deferring it, could we not approve it with that condition in there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can address that. If the committee wishes to consider something along those lines, I would recommend that the condition of septic approval be in advance of the signing of the certificate of official for the creation of the lot rather than the issuance of the building permit. Otherwise, we run the risk of making a lot that is incapable of being serviced. That's really the concern of planning, is to make sure that everything is met before we recommend approval. However, I have seen this committee do that in other instances.
Okay, I just to follow up, I would like to propose that we do that with this application and any others that we're going to be dealing with between now and the time the snow is gone, especially if a lot is a number of acres that we know there's going to be a site for a septic. And whatever the timing is, whether it's at time of signing or building permit, I'm okay with that. I just think for planning's time, for our time, when we have it before us, let's deal with it, make that a condition. So once the condition's fulfilled, they can go ahead and get started.
Absolutely. If the committee wishes to proceed with that, we can do that. There are no recommended conditions written up from planning staff at this point. However, I can say that I would only have recommended the inclusion of all of the standard conditions: survey, reference plan, park fee, road widening, all of the normal requirements. There wouldn't be any additional conditions imposed based on a planning recommendation for this lot.
Other members of the committee have a comment in regard to Francis's point? Go ahead, Victor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a really good idea if we can do that. I'm not sure that we are prepared to do that today because we don't have the actual written conditions for for the Committee of Adjustment to see what these conditions are. But perhaps if we could bring it back to our March meeting, that would, it's a month delay, but it would probably still give them a bit of a head start, given that even in March, beginning of March, they're probably not going to be able to do septic inspections.
Go ahead, Francis.
And just to follow up, maybe we could give staff direction on any that are coming forward if they have the standard conditions in there. And if it's just septic we're waiting for, to go ahead and put that condition in for us to have a look at approving as just a matter of course in how we do business. Brent had his hand up too.
Go ahead, Brent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of the fact of how frequently we meet, as well as the number of requests that are coming through, and just the reality of winter in Central Frontenac, certainly it makes sense. I think it's a great idea that Fran's brought forward. I'm totally in favor of it.
Okay. Any other comments from any members of the committee? Pro or con?
I mean, I agree with
support of
what
that
Fran
as
said.
well.
I agree with Fran.
Okay, listen, if the members of the committee and the planning staff would agree with this, I can simply change this motion that the new lot be approved until a proposed lot can be evaluated for septic suitability and all other standard conditions. Would that work, Jenny?
If the committee's acceptable to that, I would like to note that if we're going to do it that way, we can say standard conditions. In plus the requirement that before the certificate is signed, that septic suitability is determined.
Yes, that's really what it's saying here, is until the proposed lot can be evaluated for septic suitability.
Okay, and then in addition to all other standard conditions, yeah, I think from blending that would be acceptable. As I said, there were no other conditions that I would be recommending other than the standard one. So I think that makes sense if the committee's in favor and if the applicant's okay without having had the chance to fully read and review those conditions. That would be something else I would want to consider.
Does the committee members agree with this direction?
Definitely.
Mr. Chair?
Victor, go ahead.
Would it be possible for Jenny to do a real quick cut and paste so that we actually have the conditions, email them to you so that you can read them out to us? 'Cause I'm a little nervous about sort of saying, oh, well, this is a good idea, but we don't have it nailed down concretely. Right. I'm concerned that we're going to go ahead and it is a good idea, but that we make a mistake on this first one.
Right. Listen, members of the committee, why don't we ask if the planning department can bring this back at the very next meeting? Because I suspect that Mr. Brown's not going to be doing anything in regard to this particular lot for at least another month anyway, because there's still quite a bit of snow, and I'm a good testament to that because I'm waiting in it every day. That you're not going to begin building on this lot immediately because 1 month delay may not really affect your schedule that much. Would the committee take that direction?
I would certainly agree with that, and especially because this is our first one, we need to get it right, and we don't want to end up with rushing Jenny and missing something or putting something in that Doug won't agree with down the road. So let's wait, let's defer it, bring it back on the 26th, and be prepared with all of those conditions put in that we've talked about tonight. I'd be good with that. Would Mr. Brown be good with that?
On the 26th? What's the 26th?
I know, I think can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, we would be happy with that. And that to us makes a lot of sense that for going forward, that it wouldn't delay and revisit at different meetings. It just makes sense. And as long as that condition is met, that would be the only thing that would be holding back. So it makes perfect sense to us.
Okay.
We don't want a lot that doesn't have a septic either, so.
Right.
Houses are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't want to see you create a lot that has no site at all for a septic system, and without visiting it, the specialist probably wouldn't know. So I would like to read this motion. If there's no further comments from members of the committee, I'll read the motion. Moved by Nikki Gowdy, second by Sherry Wan, the consent application B6221 Hinchbrook Brown for the property located on part lot 1 and 2, concession 7 and 8 in the geographic township of Hinchbrook for a 1.15, 2.85 acre parcel. New lot be deferred until the proposed lot can be evaluated for the septic suitability. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Victor.
Mr. Chair, that's not what we agreed to. Because now you're putting in that condition that it has to, that the septic has to be signed off on before we can do the consent application.
Maybe we can stop it just deferred.
Just deferred.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree. But I thought that was the reason for deferring it.
Oh, yes, and that is the reason that we're doing it. But the way the motion is written, it sounds as if it will be deferred until South Frontenac Septic says there's a site, a septic site. And that would be way down the road rather than us agreeing to the consent application at our next meeting.
Right, okay. I'll just stop at deferred and I'll stroke the rest of it out. That's satisfactory?
Good.
All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Okay. Next item on tonight's agenda is B7021 Inchbrook Sproul Lot Addition. Who's leading the discussion on this one?
Mr. Chair, it's Dimitri.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So just want to point out that the proposed development as part of B70, the lot addition, is a package deal between application B70 for the lot addition, minor variance application A24, and minor variance application A25. So all these three applications go hand in hand. So what I'm going to do is my presentation is going to talk about the development and then talk about how each of these applications relate to this specific development. So consent application B7021HI and minor variance application A2421 and A2521 have been submitted to support a development on an existing and undersized vacant lot of record located at an unnumbered address on Micah Mine Lane with a legal description of Part Lot 30, Concession 2 in the geographic township of Hinchinbrook. The development proposes to construct a 152 square meter or a 1,630 square foot dwelling, an attached 15.3 or 163 square foot screened in porch, a 30.8 square meter or 332 square foot attached deck, and to install a new septic system. So to accommodate this development, the applicants have proposed to sever a 0.09 hectare or 0.22 acre lot addition parcel from an adjacent property located at 1076 Micah Mine Lane. So the property to the north highlighted here in blue. Since this lot addition parcel will result in 1076 Micah Mine Lane to decrease in size from 0.51 hectares or 1.27 acres to 0.42 hectares or 1.05 acres, a minor variance has been submitted to permit the creation of a retained undersized lot of record. So being adjust the area in blue. The application A2521, that minor variance is requesting a variance to the minimum water body setback and the front yard setback to the dwelling and deck proposed as part of this application. So as I had mentioned, the property subject to this application is an existing lot of record that was created in the 1970s, and it's remained vacant ever since. It's undersized when looking at current standards for minimum lot sizes on a waterfront area. The lot itself is quite shallow. It's approximately 39 meters or 130 feet deep, and it's accessed by Micah Mine Lane, which is a private road. So due to the topography of the property, its shallow depth, it's not really feasible to meet the minimum water body setback requirement of 30 meters. So that's why the minor variance has been proposed. To make things a little bit more complicated, the property also fronts onto Eagle Lake, which has been deemed to be an at-capacity lake trout lake by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And the township official plan states that a reduction to the water body setback on an at-capacity lake can only be varied if the reduction is supported by an environmental impact assessment, or an EIA for short, that determines there will be no impact to the at-capacity lake following the proposed development. So the applicant submitted an EIA, which was prepared by Ontario Lake Assessment and Environmental Educational Services and dated November 4th, 2021. The EIA was prepared with consultation with the county, the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, and the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. The EIA ultimately concluded that there is no impact anticipated on Eagle Lake as long as the applicant and the development abides by the recommended conditions that were outlined in the EIA report. These recommended conditions have been included as conditions as part of application A2521. The EIA was then peer reviewed by both Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and the Conservation Authority. Both of the agencies agreed with the findings and recommendation and the recommended conditions outlined in the EIA and had no further comments or concerns. The application was also circulated to the Township of South Frontenac Building Services for septic comments. South Frontenac staff determined that the property is able to support a septic system in the proposed location, and that location is set back as far as possible. I think it's about 30 meters from the high water mark of Eagle Lake. We did not receive any comments from the public on this application. We did have one inquiry, but it was just they were just looking for some information. However, planning staff are recommending that the Committee of Adjustment hear comments from the public and approve all three applications as submitted, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Cindy, do we have anybody, the applicant or agent on the line in regard to these applications?
Yes, we do. I'm moving over Mr. Sproul. Can you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore the rationale for the lot addition, which was to provide as much space as possible to achieve the greatest compliance with respect to setback from the water for the proposed cottage. And in terms of the lot that is being encroached upon for the lot addition, which I own, that will make really no material difference to that lot. It's considered by today's standards undersized, but in fact, that's quite a large cottage lot. And so it will make no real material difference in terms of the use of that lot. There's no further development. We've had a cottage on that lot since the early 1970s. And so we were able to proceed with that lot addition to give the buyer of the expanded lot more space to comply with the setback requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Committee members, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant in regard to this application? Francis, go ahead.
I just have a question on that last slide that was put up. I don't believe it was the right slide. It had Barker on it. Yeah. Dimitri, could you have a look at that again?
Yes, thank you. I just noticed that it's just a copy and paste there when I make the slides. It was just the header. The slide itself does speak to the comments specifically for this application. In fact, the picture that was on the slide is the plan of survey that the applicant had prepared and submitted to support this application. So I apologize for that copy and paste there on the header.
Okay, just as long as the information in that is correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have also moved over Mr. Allah. He is, I think, one of the applicants as well related to the application.
Yep, go ahead.
You might need to unmute, Mr. Allah. There should be an unmute button to the bottom left. There you go.
Sorry about that. Found it. I just wanted to elaborate on one of the points that was made. It's not obvious on the graphic that Dimitri put up.
Oh,
we lost him.
Sorry, that may have been my error. I was trying to lower his hand and I may have hit the wrong button. So I will see if we can get him back on the line.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that, Mr. Allah. That might have been my error.
No problem at all. So I just wanted to make one comment, and that is the graphic that Dimitri showed didn't show all of the topography of the vacant lot. One of the things I want you to be aware of is that the proposed structure that's being built is moved over to the right towards the lot addition. And the reason for that is there is a large outcrop just to the left of that. And that outcrop, can't be taken down. It actually turned out to be, because it's flat on top, it actually turned out to be a good place for the septic system. And the septic system will rest on that flat rock plateau. But the property must be moved over in order to achieve the setback from the water because, yes, exactly. Now you've got a good understanding of why it has to be moved over and why the lot addition is required. This large rock plateau is kind of an impediment to placing a structure there.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can you take that down now, Cindy? Here we go. Now, Cindy, is anybody in the public besides the two gentlemen, the two applicants, have any comments on this?
If there's anyone else wishing to speak, can you use the raise hand feature? I see no one, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Committee members, do you have any further comments or on these applications? If we don't hear any more, then I'm going to read all three of these motions because they've already been described by planners. So it's just a matter of doing the paperwork. Anybody objecting to that? Because what bothers me is I can't smell supper cooking tonight. So at any rate, the first motion moved by Fran Smith, second by Brent Cameron. The consent application B70 21 Hinchinbrook Roll for the property located in part lot 30, concession to part lot 9 and 10 in geographic township of Hinchinbrook for a 0.09 hectare, 0.22 acre lot addition for 4.85 hectare be approved, subject to the conditions noted in the planning report as amended on February 10, 2022. Said amendments related to condition 7 as noted below. 7, that the schedule for consent shall include the names and the transfers and transferees, a description of the parcel being severed, C, a description of the lands receiving the lot addition, and D, the following condition: the lands to be severed are for the purpose of a lot addition only to the adjacent lands described as part lot 30, concession to part 11R164 TWFR 750551, except for the easement herein, Part 3, 13R 17019 Central Frontenac, and any subsequent transfer charge or conveyance of the lands to be severed is subject to section 53 or subsection 55 if the plan of subdivision of the Planning Act. Neither the lands to be severed nor the adjacent lands are to be reconveyed without the other parcel unless a further consent is obtained. The owner shall cause the lands to be severed to be consolidated on title with the adjacent lands, and for this condition to be entered into a parcel register as a restriction. The Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirement of the Planning Act, including the providing of a notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued as required by the Planning Act. Any further discussion? All in favor? I think I got enough. The motion's carried. And moving on, I have another motion moved by Tom Dewey, second by Philip Smith. That minor variance application A2421 Stroll for the property located in part lot 30, concession to part lot 9 and 10 in geographic township of Hinchinbrook permit a lot that is smaller than what is permitted by the waterfront residential zone be approved, subject to conditions noted in the planning report, and that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirement of the Planning Act, including the providing of a notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. Further discussion? All in favor? Motion's carried. And I have a motion moved by Nick County, second by Sherry Wan, that minor variance application A2521 Ali Dosi for the property located on part lot 30, concession 2, part lot 11 in geographic township of Hinchinbrook to reduce the front yard water body setback from 30 meters to 20 meters to allow for dwelling and from 30 meters to 20.3 meters for the septic system, and also a variance to reduce the rear yard setback from 7 meters to 2.4 meters for the private lane for a septic system to be approved subject to the conditions noted in the planning report, and that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirement of the Planning Act, including the providing of a notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. Further discussion? All in favor? Motion's carried. And last item on tonight's agenda is BO 22 Tellier lot addition. Who wishes to lead off on the, which planner wants to lead off on this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That will be myself, Jenny, tonight. This is an application that is a resubmission of a previously approved application that was before the committee. This application has been resubmitted as the applicant was unable to fill the conditions of provisional consent before the 1-year time period lapsed. This is an application for a lot addition to enlarge an oddly shaped and undersized parcel that was previously a road allowance, township road allowance that has been closed and stopped up. However, instead of that road allowance being added to the abutting property, it was created as a independent lot, which made some significant challenges with regards to that lot meeting the required setbacks. As you can see on the screen here, the yellow outline is the existing property, the existing lot that is to be added to. Very much regular, the unopened road allowance. The lot addition is the hatched area at the end here. It says proposed lot addition. It will be adding approximately 100 meters of water frontage along the creek. No road frontage. The entire road frontage for the enlarged parcel will be the existing 20-meter frontage along Beeley Road that resulted from the road allowance closing. The resulting shape of this will be slightly irregular, what was considered in planning as a flag-shaped lot. This one very much resembles a flag compared to some of them too. This enlarged lot will meet the provisions of both the official plan and the township zoning bylaw for minimum lot area and frontage for a waterfront lot. Both the subject property, retained lands, and the lot addition are currently zoned rural and will remain as such after this application. There's no recommendation for any rezoning. This was not circulated to South Frontenac for review of septic suitability, as both the lot addition and benefiting parcel are vacant, and the septic location on the retained lands is well outside the area of the lot addition that's proposed. This was not recirculated to Quinte Conservation for formal comments, as they had no objections initially, and there was no special requirements, and there was no alteration to the application from the initial proposal. Based on this, planning staff are recommending approval of this application as submitted, subject to any comments from the public heard at the meeting today.
Okay. Is there any comments from the applicant or their agent, Cindy?
I don't believe we have the applicant on. If there is anyone representing the applicant or agent, can you use the raise hand feature? I see no one, Mr. Chair.
Committee members, do you have any questions of the applicant or their agent? Francis, go ahead.
I have a question of Jenny, I believe. We're adding this proposed addition to the pole of the flag, and so we're creating a lot that can be built on. Why do we not require septic approval?
Because we are enlarging a lot to hopefully make it buildable. In theory, they could build on the pole of the flag at this point. They probably wouldn't be able to meet setbacks. Generally, when looking at lot additions and enlargements, we're adding to an existing lot of record. So it's kind of implied that they would be permitted to build on it. Realistically, the pole should never have been created as a separate lot. It really, when it was closed, should have been added to the one beside it. We can circulate these if this is something the committee is interested in. Generally, when looking at lot additions, if there's no septic system in the vicinity, it's not a standard practice of planning staff to circulate for septic suitability, as we're not creating the lot. We're hopefully making it larger to try and make it more buildable.
Okay, just seemed odd that, you know, we are creating a lot from this irregular one, but I'm fine with that. I just needed to be clear.
Any other member of the committee have a comment from Cindy or from the planners? Jenny, I have a question for you. This is actually a stream that flows into Gull Lake, am I correct?
Yes, I believe it does.
So why would the Quinte Conservation Authority be comment on this and not the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority?
Because I probably should have typed Mississippi Valley. You are absolutely correct. It was Mississippi and not Quinte.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Cindy, do any member of the public have any questions regard to this application?
If there is anyone from the public who wishes to speak, can you use the raise hand feature, please? I see no one, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions from any member of the committee? Or read the motion? In which case, then I will read the motion moved by Victor Hayes, second by Tom Dewey, the consent application B0122 Tellier for the property located in part lot 31 concession 6 in the geographic township of Kennebec for 1.42 hectare, 3.5 acre parcel as a lot addition be approved subject to the conditions noted in the planning report with the amendment to condition 6 as noted below. That the schedule for consent shall include the names and transfer of the transferor and transferees, a description of the parcel being severed, description of the lands receiving the lot addition, and H, the following condition: the lands to be severed are for the purpose of a lot addition only to the adjacent lands described as concession part roads allowance RP 13R 21080 part 2 Kennebec Central Frontenac, and any subsequent transfer or charge or other convenience of the lands to be severed is subject to section 50 Part 3 and subsection 50 Part 5 if the plan of subdivision of the Planning Act. Neither the lands to be severed nor the adjacent lands are to be reconvened without the other parcel unless a further consent is obtained. The owner shall cause the lands to be severed to be consolidated on title with adjacent lands, and for this condition to be entered into the parcel registered as a restriction. And that the Secretary Treasurer will issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirement of the Planning Act, including the providing of a notice of decision to the other applicants or any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and that the conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision for the issue or required of the Planning Act. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion before us? This motion's carried. Is there any other planning business to come before us tonight? Planning folks? Hearing none, I have a motion moved by Francis Smith and second by Victor Hayes that this meeting be adjourned until 4 p.m. on March the 10th, 2022 virtually. Everybody voting against this? All in favor? Motion's carried. Now listen, you gentlemen, don't forget that 14th of February, if you want to have a quiet home, you better do something.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.